God willing, you can all see a picture of an icon.
Yeah.
Grand. Okay. One of the reasons that's up there is just simply to give you something to look at that's a bit more interesting than me. And if your brain starts to drift while I'm burbling away, you can just look at the picture and enjoy. Just to give you some access to it before I begin, as it were, I'll just point out some things about this icon. You'll see it's an icon of Holy Wisdom, who's the lady sort of that's got the biggest circle. And you'll see she's winged, which is a way that iconographers indicate that somebody is a heavenly being, a celestial being. And she's also got red skin, which again is a way that iconographers say that this celestial person, this is them trying to represent somebody that hasn't ever actually taken flesh, sort of. You'll see too how her hands holding bread and wine mirror Christ's hands held up in blessing. And the bread and the wine echo something that Holy Wisdom says in Proverbs, which she comes and she calls people to her table and tells them to come and eat her bread and drink her wine. And you'll see both the figure of Christ and the figure of Holy Wisdom. They're both wearing the same colours. They're both surrounded by a blue circle, which is a way of describing everything that is in icon terms. So the iconographer is saying that both Jesus and wisdom are at the center of everything that is. And then the gold circle around their head says that they're divine. And the color of their robes, that deep purplish red, is the color of royalty. So it's also saying these are pretty important people. And this is an icon that's designed to show you the relationship between wisdom and Christ. So for many years as a Christian, right into when I was in Holy Orders, I struggled to see the importance of Jesus in the story of our salvation. I accepted it as a point of faith, obviously, and I was duly appreciative of his sacrifice, but I wasn't really sure what relevance he had to me now. Jesus, as I saw it, was separated from me by time, sex, and even the unique nature of his resurrection seemed to make him still more distant. So as a curate, I couldn't help noticing that I very rarely even mentioned him in my sermons. My speech, my prayer was all primarily about the Godhead, and I didn't mention Jesus much at all. I can't remember when I first began to curl my fingers around the threads of wisdom theology. Was it my resonance with the book of Job? Was it the slow repetition, Christmas after Christmas, of the opening lines of John's Gospel? Or the vehemence of the Jehovah's Witnesses in insisting on inverting the translation of the beginning of John's Gospel, and how I reacted to their attempt to dilute those opening words? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. Slowly, I found my eye being drawn to this figure of wisdom, who ducks and weaves her way through the Old and New Testament, who stands by the wayside and calls us to God, who has set her table and bids us come, who rejoices in the whole of creation and in the human race, who offers us a deeper, fuller understanding of life and love, and who offers us life in all its fullness. Jewish theologians, as the newest bits of the Old Testament were being written, began to identify this figure of wisdom that we find in Proverbs and Ecclesiastes and Ecclesiasticus. They begin to identify her with the Torah, with the Jewish law, which was already developing a bigger sense in the Jewish imagination than just simply the first 5 books of the Bible. The Torah was almost something alive for them. Holy wisdom began to be woven in, not just with the Torah, but with all of God's covenantal relationship with her people, all of those places where God reaches out her hand to find the people of God. We find wisdom. In a sense, it is wisdom who is stretched gloriously across the sky in all the colours of the rainbow. Wisdom who holds her hand out to Noah and offers him peace and comfort. And because much of the mechanisms for God's covenant run through the temple too becomes an expression of wisdom. A place where everyday grain becomes holy, where blood is shed for purity, where you can reach out your hand and almost touch God. The Jewish philosopher Philo took these ideas and wrapped them in the Greek ideas of law being something greater than the sum of rules past, of law being the beating heart of the universe that calls us to order and righteousness. And Philo uses the Greek word logos, which means word, to describe this idea of his, of wisdom at the heart of the universe. Word describes her rather well. Communication, meeting of minds, an expression of will and desire. Certainly John thought so, anyway, and pegged his gospel on this cosmic perspective. You can find it woven right through the New Testament. So now when I look on Jesus, I see God's endless desire for us, somehow manifested as the very thing he desires, cementing God's covenant with us in her own body. I think this is why Peter says there is no other path to God. For how can there be? When Jesus is the desire of God for his creation, Jesus is every rope that God has ever thrown us, law, temple, even these first promises to Noah that we heard this morning. Then, of course, there is no other name that saves, no other name that restores us to life and wholeness, no other name that restores us to all that God has called us to be, because that is quite simply who Jesus is and what he has always done. This resurrection that Peter proclaims is not some distant, unique event 2,000 years ago, but an eternal event fixed in time. By his resurrection, Jesus, who is holy wisdom, who is the desire of God, who has yearned for us since the beginning of time, Jesus transforms the nature of reality with his own body. This resurrection that we celebrate this Easter time is not just an isolated event particular to this extraordinary God-man. It is the demonstration of the power of God made possible because Jesus met his own conditions for righteousness and broke the cycle of sin. And this resurrection then is offered to us. It is our salvation the transformation of our bodies into the glory of God. It is given to us by baptism, and we are renewed in it by the sacraments and by our daily attempts to conform ourselves closer to the image of God. This is our faith. I could go on probably at longer length than is desirable, and I am aware that my brain runs best on distinctly abstract lines, which is why I gave you a picture. And I'm also aware that this perspective of Christ is not helpful to everyone. But in a way, this is kind of my point this morning. For this religion of ours hinges on this event that Peter proclaims in our New Testament reading. It hinges on the resurrection. And it is important that each one of us finds a way to make it ours, to make it your own, to make it something that resonates with you and is meaningful to you. We need to talk to people, to read, even novels and all those wonderful things that we were being shared with this morning. To pray, above all to pray, and to find your connection, not mine, yours, with why this resurrection is important to you. My friends, you need to find your rainbow. You need to find that thing which is spread across the sky, that shares with you the promises of God, assures you of God's comfort and peace. Because only then will you really be able to share it with other people. And only then will it change your life. Thank you. Other screen.
Thank you.
Stop the sharing. Stop sharing.
Stop sharing. That's all.